the humanity of it. Like, that's what I really remember when we were talking about everything. It went back to the humanity of everything, because like you said, when there are people who are upset that they're feeling like Black Lives Matter. I was talking to my husband about this, and we ended up going on the website to look at their actual mission, because what frustrates me about Black Lives Matter, when everybody comes on and they're like, well, all lives matter. In my head, I'm like, no shit, all lives matter. Like, we know all lives matter. Black Lives Matter was created to bring attention to the fact that for years, Black people have been in very unfavorable circumstances when it comes to police brutality, when it comes to the justice system, when it comes to stereotypes against them. And not to say that there aren't other minorities or other people in general who have had these same challenges, but the Black Lives Matter group was created because there was a group of people who was frustrated with seeing this in their community. And so they wanted to start conversations to bring attention to these things. They didn't do it because they wanted other people to feel like they weren't allowed to be a part of their group. That's why you can have allies within Black Lives Matter. And why I understand how some people get frustrated with, but all lives matter, because it does feel like an exclusion thing. But then if we talk about the anti-Stop Asian Hate movement that's happening right now, Asians aren't the only ones who are being targeted and discriminated against. But right now, the Asian community is so afraid for their life. They wanted to start a message, because that's a way. Oh, here we go. Inside Out, the movie. Mm-hmm. This is going to help me summarize my point. Let me finish closing out the Asian hate point. The Asian hate, Stop Asian Hate, the Asian community is feeling attacked right now, because of COVID originated in China, so it has to be Chinese people. There are people who are putting stereotypes of how COVID happened onto a whole community of people who were also having to struggle through COVID with us. It's COVID doesn't see race or anything like that. COVID is COVID. But now there's
like a bacteria. It's like, hey, bacteria, where do you want to go?
But now there's a whole community of people who feel targeted because of COVID. This goes back to like 9/11. When 9/11 happened, there were Muslim children who couldn't even feel safe at school anymore.
Or people who look like that in general.
Yeah, and it's not fair. That is what all these movements come to, because then when things get so intense in a single community, we have to rally together. We have to stand up so our voices get loud so people can hear. And then it's known, because when we're aware of a problem, we can do something about it. We know that's just a basic principle. So what happens in these situations, I personally feel, is that the community is under such a high stress environment. They're thinking, how can we rally together? How can we pull with us so that we can do something about this? It's nothing about inclusion. It's nothing about our race is more important than your race. It's nothing about our problems are bigger than your problems. It's nothing about we've been struggling with these problems longer than you, so therefore we're more important. It's all about a group of people decided that this is so bad, we have to make noise in a way that's going to get attention, however it gets attention.
And that's what it's doing right now.
And that's what it's doing. It's doing its job, because now we're talking about it. And why I brought up the movie Inside Out was because, so if you don't know about the movie Inside Out, it's about this little girl, Riley, who is pretty much going through puberty. And so her emotions are starting to be all over the place. And we're all learning, as Riley is learning, that our emotions are there to guide us in life, to make decisions to support the outcomes we desire. That's pretty much what we learn about. That's one of the takeaways I feel we learn in this movie, right? And then you think about sadness. You think about the whole movie. Joy was telling sadness, just be quiet, just be quiet. You're going to make Riley sad. Don't make Riley sad, don't make Riley sad, don't make Riley sad. And sadness would have to go into her corner and be quiet. And Joy made her read all the manual books just to keep her busy, because nobody wanted sadness to be part of Riley's emotions.
Sadness
right?
is one of my favorite ones, by the way.
Sadness was one of my favorites. So at the end of the movie, though, we see that every single time Riley was in distress and needed support and comfort, it was sadness that was able to get the attention of the people around her so that they could rally around her and comfort her. Mm-hmm. It was the emotion that everybody was trying to keep out that needed to be expressed so that the outside could understand we're hurting right now and we need support. Mm-hmm. And so when they see that, then they all come around and they support. To me, that's where the humanity comes in. When we hear things like Black Lives Matter, when we hear Stop Asian Hate, when we were going through all the immigration things, and forgive me, I forgot the hashtag with that, but I know there was a hashtag with that one. And that one was just as important. They're all just as important. I'm only thinking of Black Lives Matter and Stop Asian Hate right now because that's what's happening in our media. But for me, when I have other people who are challenging me, saying that I feel the hashtags are necessary, the movement is necessary, I always come back to the point of it's the humanity in it. Just like all lives matter is important, Black Lives Matter is just as important as all lives matter. And Stop Asian Hate is just as important. We can all exist together and express the fact that there are things going on in this world that none of us are quite happy with. And all of us only want to be peaceful and happy within our communities. Deep down, that's really all we want. We all want to just be able to feel safe at home. Mm-hmm. It comes down to it. And if you think of it from that aspect, of course, there are going to be people who get offended by the Black Lives Matter because they're either going to feel like no one's speaking up for how they don't feel safe at home, or they feel like they're being singled out for making someone feel unsafe. And so then rather than focus on the sadness that's being expressed within the Black Lives Matter group, they're only focused on their own frustrations, mm-hmm. And so where the humanity comes in is when just listen to a friend. An example I used one time was if somebody comes, they're limping up to you, you go, "Oh my gosh, what's wrong?" You say, "My foot's broke." And they say, "Oh yeah, I broke my foot a few weeks ago. It hurt real bad." And you're like, "But my foot's broke. I need help." Mm-hmm. And the other person just sitting there talking about their pain. But right now you have someone in front of you who's telling you, "I'm hurt, I need help." But you're so self-centered on what you have. You can't be human for just a minute and have sympathy for your fellow human who's expressing, "I'm hurt right now, can you help me?"
Yeah, or like whatever broke their foot, like, I don't know what usually breaks foot, like if you like hit something and you're like, let's gang up on whatever that thing that just broke your foot. Let's make it know that it destroyed your foot, and versus like focusing on the humanity of what's happening with that person. It's like the outside things, the political aspect that's kind of putting their opportunity on top, taking its role versus the issue, like you mentioned. You have to be, in a sense, it's like that sadness, that humanity is the one that's overlooked versus everything else is happening. Like what's that one quote when Nemo says, you can't solve a solution or a problem from when it started or how it started? I can't remember.
I always say you can't heal in the place that made you sick.
Yeah, like kind of in that aspect as well. The same thing with all these different hashtags, all these different things of how it started. The violence, the anger, all that is how it started, right, in a sense. And then the sadness is almost as like a result and effect of it. But the end goal doesn't mean you have more hate, doesn't mean you have more, anger, doesn't mean all these different things. Is to understand where it's coming from.
Right. And I think that brings me to, like, if we were to have a solution around this, like, I mean, I know there's no easy solution to get everybody to understand we're all on the same side here. Like, we're all trying to fight for equality. And let me bring it back, because I understand that there are forces against equality and compassion. I get that. We experienced that all last presidential term. So I'm going to just say that and leave that at that. But this is why I feel the solution has to be like the quote, be the change you wish to see in the world. For me, and I notice I'm like this in all my relationships, whether they're professional, personal, even with myself, like my relationship with myself. If we're complaining about stuff, go ahead, get it off your chest. We need to vent. It's healthy. We need to talk about what's bothering us because, again, when we're aware of it, only can we do something about it. I am not against venting. I think that it's bullshit when people say positive vibes only, because like there are going to be negative vibes sometimes and you're going to have to honor them. It's balance. And so, but the key is, what do you do after you realize you're having this negative emotion going through you? And that's where like be the change you wish to see comes to mind for me. It's such a powerful quote to me, because even when I was a little girl, I was taught treat your neighbor how you want to be treated. And it was such a simple concept to me. Like, if I want to see good in the world, I have to be good to the world, because I can't control what anybody else does. I can only control Tiara. I can't control my emotion. I can't control other people's emotions. I can only control Tiara's emotions. I can't control what other people decide is right and wrong. I can only control what Tiara decides is right and wrong, you know? And with that, that means that if I'm complaining about all this stuff going on in my community, then the next step for me is to take a step back and say, well, what are you doing to address it? Mm-hmm. Because if I'm just going to sit here and I'm going to count on everybody else to fix the problems that I'm having, that
exactly like where's the power to that? Then you're disempowered, thinking the next person, the next leader, the next authority, whoever it is gonna be your savior. But in reality, you are your own savior. You know yourself the best. That's why I would love working with mothers, because they've seen their kids 24/7, right? And a lot of times when you go to like a regular doctor, you ask them what's going on. They don't know what's going on. The mom does. For some reason, they had that feeling, that gut feeling, and they are empowered to advocate for their little ones because they know, because they've seen, because they've felt and heard, and all these different things of how, you know, the little ones are suffering or happening, in like whether it's going on with their at home and all these different things. And that empowerment is where we want to strive more towards, right? To know that we can do something about it, starting with ourselves, because you can't control. Someone mentioned there's like 3 types of control, or 3 types of things that you can do. Is either something that you can do, something that other people are doing, or like God's control. Like there's 3 different.
Oh, NLP.
Is it? Yeah.
The hero, the victim, and the villain.
So if you want to describe like that part.
Okay, yeah. So in NLP, you have the hero who's at the top of the triangle, the victim and the villain who are like at the bottom base of the triangle. And in NLP, we're taught that ideally we don't exist within this triangle, period. We recognize that we are all equal players in the world, and we all have contributions to give, and we also have room to receive contributions from others. It's like a balance again. And so in NLP, we're taught that what tends to happen is people put themselves in either the hero, the victim, or the villain mentality. And the problem with that is that if one of those roles are filled, that means you need 2 other people to fill those roles, or 2 other situations, challenges, kind of thing. And so people who exist in the hero mentality, they feel immense pressure to be the one in their circle, in their community, who takes care of everybody, who can defeat the villain, and who can make sure the victims feel safe, right? Victim mentality are people who they have everything bad happening to them, and they're either waiting for the villain to come attack, or they're waiting for the hero to come save them, but the victim does nothing. And then there's the villain. When people who exist in the villain mentality, they feel that no matter what, they're always going to be the bad guy. So they're either waiting for the victim to blame them for something, or they're waiting for the hero to come down hard on them for something they did. And you know, also you got to remember that if I put myself in the hero mentality, then now I'm thinking about the victims I have to take care of all the time and the villains I have to go fight all the time. If I put myself in the villain mentality, I'm thinking of all the victims that hate me, and I'm thinking of how the hero is always trying to come defeat me. And if I put myself in the victim mentality, then I'm always thinking of how the villain is coming to get me, and the only person who's going to save me is the hero. Mm-hmm. And so I think, you know, within each of those, you can start to see the dangers of it, because then as the hero, even though it's great to want to help people, who's going to be there to help you? You know, when you have things that are going on, where's your support system at? Because when you're the hero, you know, Superman was Superman. Superman had to fight everybody, you know. Superman had to do it all. Superman had to take care of Lois. Superman had to, and no one was there to save Superman, you know, like it was just Superman. And then Superman was super, and that was still a lot for him. So as human beings, that's a lot of pressure to put on yourself. You shouldn't have to be the hero, because you should be available for if someone has comfort they want to offer or encourage you with, then you're able to receive it. And then you can also be in the position to where if you see someone in need, you can go support them. And with the victim mentality, you know, it's not healthy to think that you have no power in any situation. You should always feel empowered to at least care for yourself. And I know you and I talk a lot about the airplane scenario, like, you know, put the mask on your face first. And that's so why the victim mentality, people need to understand that, because even if you have a desire to help others, you can't if you're too hurt to help yourself. If you're limping around with a broke foot and you want to go help carry a child across the river before the river overflows, you need to make sure you set your foot, wrap it up, and figure out what you're going to do for pain while you help get the baby across the river before you can even help get the baby across the river, or you and the baby probably going to drown in the river because your foot hurt, you know? So, and then the thing with the villains is it's not good for anybody to ever think that they're so horrible no one can love them. Mm-hmm. Have a hard time loving themselves because they know that I've done such horrible things. I am unlovable. Like, that's what, even when you watch Disney movies, that's always the sad thing about the villain, is it was like, oh, he just needed a little more love, you know, like
a lot of those villain movies, right? Any villain,
right? Like, they just needed a little more love. And so I think it's ever since I learned that at NLP, that's how I try to view situations. I try to understand who's playing the hero, the victim, the villain, so I can understand their perspective and then speak to them from that way. Because my goal in these conversations is always to help people understand where their power really lies. And if they are playing the hero, I like to help them relieve that pressure so that they can like truly be heroic, in the sense that they take care of themselves as an example to show when we take care of ourselves, look how much good we can do in the world. Mm-hmm. You know, we love ourselves, we heal ourselves to heal the world. And so, so yeah, that's what I thought of when you said there are the three things.
Yeah. Like, so when you mentioned that you can be the change that you see in the world, like literally, right? Even by thought, even by actions, or, you know, for speaking with someone. And so those are the little things.
And I do want to address, especially with this being the Holistic Hope podcast, I do want to address that sometimes that change is a big change, you know, and you do have to be in the space to give yourself grace to understand that the big change you're not going to see the effects of it overnight. It can happen internally overnight. I've done it. I've seen it. I've experienced it. But you got to give everything else around you time to catch up to that to that energy shift you just had within you. And it is going to happen. But then you also have to remember that your fear, your doubt, your low confidence, those things will play into how fast the effects go out from within, because those are low vibe emotions. So they hinder your vibration from expanding,
Mm-hmm. It's not
And
like
so
they're
that's
awful, right? They're meant to protect you, but sometimes it's too much protection because it's
right.
too
And
much
so
fear. Yeah.
exactly. There's always too much. You can have too much high vibe, you can have too much low vibe. It's a balance. Because and so I just want to say, just don't feel like just because we're saying be the change you wish to see, you have to go out and be that change overnight. Like sometimes it takes like sitting down and looking at, well, what is the change I want to see? Like, and even if it's something as simple as I want the streets of our neighborhood to be cleaner. And while you could go out tomorrow and buy trash pickers and trash bags, start picking up stuff and like rally your friends, yeah, you could do that. But, the long-term effects probably won't be there because you didn't build the foundation for it first, you know?
Mm-hmm.
But if you take the time to say, well, why do I want cleaner streets in my neighborhood? Well, I want to be able to walk out and not see trash everywhere. I want the kids to be able to go outside and play and not play in trash. I want the elderly to be able to go for walks in their neighborhood and feel comfortable. And so now, with you getting in touch with why you want to see this change, it helps you connect with the change even more. And then it helps you embody the person who brings forth this change, because now you're not just so focused on an outcome, you're focused on your heart's desire for why this change is so important for you to see.
Mm-hmm. And for another example, if you want to go even smaller than that, just to like test it out, if you're like on social media or wherever it is, and there's a conversation that started and you see other people's comments, think about those comments and think, if you were that person, or if you're just curious why they're so angry, if you're just curious, ask a question, not in a poking, like provoking kind of way, obviously, of you should not say this because X, Y, and Z, because you should think about this because X, Y, and Z. Like, ask them, why is it that you feel this way? Because I truly want to know, truly want to know and understand. That's a reason how supposedly the whole social media network started, is to connect with people from afar, from wherever it is, to understand and build that community, not just by attacking or taking advantage or, all these different things that, seems to kind of be more prevalent now, but it's more of that connection, understanding another person's point of view of the culture of a environment of a community that's different from yours, so you can work together, so you can literally build the community that you want to see. It's come from as little as thought, as little as conversation, as little bit of a change in the understanding. Oh, this is how this person thinks. There might be other people, most likely, that will think the same way or a little differently, and understand how they think, and kind of open that mind, because that's kind of how that language works, right? People who understand bilingual or trilingual, whatever language it is to understand how they're speaking, why they're speaking, in which context they're speaking, because it's not always a one-to-one translation. It's because of how that language is formed, just like I'm sure how religion works, right? How certain things are formed, certain stories are made, therefore this philosophy, this theme runs in that community, in that culture, in that in that environment. So it can be as little as that or as big as you want.
I like that. Just to take a step back and think about boundaries. We know that we put boundaries in place in order for us to easily access flow in our life, like to have ease and flow in our life. Because when these boundaries are set, it's the closest we can get to a controlled environment, right? Now, this is what I've been noticing a lot, is that people tend to think boundaries are meant to keep other people in check, you know? But really, we cannot control anybody. Boundaries are in place to keep you in check. You put boundaries in place to keep your emotions in check, because you know what makes you feel great. You know what makes you feel not so great. You know what's going to trigger you. And when you're setting boundaries, you are setting them up in a way to make sure you can keep your emotions controlled in specific situations. So if you know that being around people who don't agree with your outlook on a certain community theme that's happening, then maybe you shouldn't put yourself in a position where a whole lot of people are going to be trying to convince you otherwise, you know, because then you know that's going to be a trigger for you. And once you're triggered, even if you have a plan in place, which is a separate conversation, having a plan for when you are triggered, but when you do get triggered by the people, you can't really get upset with them for doing what you already expected them to do before you got to that situation, knowing how it would impact you. So instead, if you are trying to reach a community who has a different perspective than you, and you know that you have something you could say to where you guys can have good conversation going, then when you're setting the boundaries, you have to think of you, not the other person. And I just felt this was important because, like how you said, you know, you could start a comment on Facebook and you can not be attacking the person, you know, you can genuinely be asking, but some people, they feel some kind of way by you asking, period. I wanted to talk about the boundaries because you know what it is you want. You know the change you want to see in the world. You also know the journey that took you to get to this point of wanting to see this change in this world so badly. Even if this is something that has been on your heart since you were little, you know, you go through things in life to where you decide, no, I'm doing this. I've kind of shied away from it before, but now I'm doing this. And now you're carrying a lot of other things with you. You know, like we can go back to the Black Lives Matter scenario. A lot of people who are for Black Lives Matter have gone through a lot of trauma in the Black community with white people being the aggressor. That's just like very common in the Black Lives community. Can't really shake that. It is what it is. So in knowing that I am a person who, if a white person comes up to me and says, why should you feel threatened by the police? I'm going to be ready to fight, because it's like, why wouldn't I feel threatened by the police? Maybe I shouldn't start having these conversations with a white person who's uneducated about police brutality. Maybe I should start these conversations with allies who understand why Black Lives Matter exists. And I coach them on how to have this conversation with their friends who may not be where they are yet, so that we all can come together and all of our boundaries are in place.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And do note that in regards to all these different acronyms that we use, we do understand that there's other culture, other people that are in these groups that may not reflect physically, you know, of those things, that you'll still support that. We
Your
understand,
allies.
but doesn't, yeah, like allies, and it doesn't mean that they're disregarded or only regarded for what they're saying as well. And so we do want to have that inclusion because people do want to help. Hence, you want towards the 3 different categories, but how they help and how it relates does take an effect on how people, you know, get triggered for boundaries.
Yeah.
You know, depends on who's saying it.
Yeah. So I did want to add that, because your boundaries are important. Your boundaries are super important because they're how you keep yourself healthy. But I wanted to add the little perspective challenge of your boundaries aren't there for you to control what other people do. They're there for you to know when this isn't the best situation for me. I got to come back to this, because my mental health is at stake at this point.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because even it goes to some of the moms I spoke with as well, because from everything's going on, maybe in cities and certain things like that, their boundaries their own boundaries may be always keep getting smaller to where they needed literally to physically move to a place where they can have a little bit more less of a trigger because it's so much happening. So I totally get the idea when, you know, people moving to certain places or out of certain states because of those reasons, because all this is overwhelming. And so what's safe for their family is for them not to be overwhelmed by all these different triggers. So it's totally understandable and totally understand that too.
Yeah. Yeah. And I don't want people to feel like we're saying you have to run away from your problems. That's not what we're saying at all. You should feel safe wherever you want to feel safe at, but you do have to understand. It's kind of like the conversation we were having about hospitals, choosing to have a birth at a hospital. We know that because hospitals have their liability things they need to take care of, because, you know, they have the business they need to run, then when we choose to have birth at a hospital, we're understanding, we're accepting the possibility that someone may step on our toes when it comes to our birth plan. And if that's something we're not okay with, then maybe we shouldn't sign up for a hospital birth. It's that kind of situation. You have to know what your tolerance level is. And you also have to know when it's okay to say too much is too much. Mm-hmm. So just to wrap things up, we're going to circle back to how this whole conversation started. And it was the humanity of the matter. I think when Kate and I had our outline topic for this, it was inspired by the George Floyd trials. And we both just felt like, as sad as the situation is, especially in the Stop Asian Hate situation is, we also feel the other side, the other perspectives where they're either confused to everything that's going on. They don't quite understand why some people are so emotional, so afraid, and things like that. And while we understand how this can be frustrating to the people who are like really deeply emotionally invested in these campaigns because of their own personal traumas and experiences and things they've seen their friends and families go through, we're not taking away from either side. And that was why we wanted to talk about humanity, because at the end of the day, with everything that's going on, we have to be able to be the change we wish to see. And in order to do that, we have to feel comfortable around our brothers and sisters who are working to impact this change with us. So while all these really hard conversations are happening, I haven't even updated myself on the trial because just those testimonies made me so emotional. I'm just, but, and I have lots of sympathy in my heart right now for the Stop Asian Hate, because being raised in a Black home, we're taught all about segregation and what that looked like and how awful it was. I don't feel any other race should ever have to experience that ever again, because we've already gone through it and we already know it's horrible and terrible, and no other human should have to live it. It should just be done. So Kate and I stand with Stop It, period, from all aspects of it. And we just wanted to come on and remind everybody that if you want to stop hate, you have to first stop hate within your heart and be able to open yourself up to love, be able to open yourself up to conversations you may not have had yet, and be open-minded enough to co-create solutions with your community so that everyone is benefited and so everyone is heard, so that we can all make progress towards the equality we're seeking, towards the peace we're seeking, so we can all feel safe at home.
Yeah. And just to add to that too, because it's not just the hashtag and not just the tagline, all these different things. Like there's something deeper. That's why the reason why we talked about the humanity part of it. It's not because of only race or only the color. It's even the differences in the thoughts, differences in anything. When there's difference, there can be segregation, there can be separation.
Yes.
And even within a culture, even within the country, if they all look the same, there's still some kind of thing that anyone can separate someone from each other. But that's the reason why we want to kind of help bring that into light, dig a little deeper, exactly where is that, and open that up, that there is that love, there is that acceptance, no matter what you may think, obviously in a very, non-aggressive, non-violent way, that there is something that we can share with each other, that we can literally be that change we want to see in the world.